Immanuel, he says, he's talking about Immanuel Kant. He said, Immanuel Kant, this is De Quincey, asked the same question. Now remember, there's blood all over the place, and Emily is breathing through a handkerchief soaked in wine. Okay. Immanuel Kant asked the question, does reality exist objectively, or is it a subjective projection of our thoughts? And the detective says, again, you've lost me. Inspector Ryan, when you look at the stars, where are they in relation to you? Excuse me, are they above you, for example? Of course. But the Earth is a globe, is it not? London is not at the Northern Pole. It is located approximately 1/3 down the sphere. We stand more or less sideways. The force of gravity keeps us from spinning off into space. Ryan looked as if he had another headache. Yes, the Earth is a globe, so logically we do stand sideways on it, but it always appears that we're on the top. Inspector, I don't believe that Kant himself could have been so eloquent. It does in fact appear that we are on top of the Earth, even though we are on its side. We act upon assumptions that control our view of reality, even though reality might be quite different. Tell me what it would feel like if you were at the bottom of the Earth gazing at the stars. In that event, Ryan looked uncomfortable. By your logic, I would be upside down, dangling by my feet, staring. The inspector swallowed down. With all the vast space before you stretching toward infinity, De Quincey says. Ryan says, the thought makes me dizzy. As does the true reality before us. We encounter violence of this magnitude and we are tempted to react automatically by stating that only a madman could have done this. Someone irrational, uncontrolled, obeying savage impulses. But what we see does not match that idea. 8 people in one room, the killer dispatches them before any of the victims, even the constable, has a chance to fight back. De Quincey gestured toward the murder scene. The constable was nearest the door as the killer entered, so this man needed to be dealt with first. Then the 3 men at the table near the fireplace, then the barmaid, then the 2 customers at the counter, and finally the tavern keeper behind it. De Quincey walked through the room and pretended to swing a murder weapon toward each victim. How many seconds did I require to do that, Inspector? Perhaps 10. But it must have been done in far less time than that. Otherwise, at least one of the victims would have been able to shout for help. These murders were committed rapidly and without hesitation, with artistry and precision. There is only one way to become this adept, with practice. This was not the killer's first experience with inflicting death. You're telling me he did this before and not just on Saturday night? De Quincey says to accomplish this task, he must have killed many people many times before. Impossible. Surely I would have heard, even if the crimes were committed far from London, news about the atrocities would have spread. The news did spread. You read about these deaths every day in the newspaper, except that they aren't referred to as crimes. Becker, does any of this make sense to you? Ryan demanded. Multiple murders that aren't called crimes. The killings aren't even called murders, De Quincey elaborated. Becker, Ryan pleaded. Becker says, I have a suspicion where he's going. And I don't want to follow the logic. It's unthinkable. That's my point, De Quincey continued. By definition, what is unthinkable isn't part of our reality. Inspector, your assumptions about what is possible prevent you from accurately seeing the reality before you. Becker interrupted, walking toward Ryan. Remember the boot prints behind the shop? They didn't have hobnails, suggesting that the murderer was someone of education and means, not a laborer. The expensive razor suggested the same thing. Ryan says, I proposed that idea to Lord Palmerston. He thoroughly rejected it. He told me that a man of education and means couldn't possibly be capable of savagery. Lord Palmerston is wrong, of course, De Quincey said. It happens every day. Not that I'm aware, Ryan objected. Bankers, co-owners, or owners of corporations and members of parliament do not go about bashing heads and gashing throats. Perhaps metaphorically they do, De Quincey said. What? Never mind, I agree. These murders weren't committed by a banker, an owner of a corporation, or a member of parliament. But imagine a context in which killings are not called murders. Perhaps if I swallowed some of that laudanum. De Quincey says, the killer is practiced at his art. He has killed many times before. He is comfortable using disguises. He speaks a language that the Malay who delivered the message last night would understand. Those pieces of information narrow the range of suspects considerably. The Malay, you're suggesting that the killer has been in the Orient and speaks some of its languages? Yes. Experience in disguises suggests a criminal, Ryan continued, or someone who wishes to blend with criminals and defeat them. You, for example, dress in disguise. De Quincey indicated Ryan's shapeless common clothes in order to blend with lower elements. I should be looking for a detective who worked in the Orient, Ryan asked in confusion. Not a detective. In the Orient, who else serves as a law enforcer? In India, for example, where cults are notorious for their disguises. Ryan looked baffled. But then as his thoughts seemed to click together, his eyes displayed sudden clarity. A soldier. Yes, a soldier. A man trained to kill without hesitation. A man who had many opportunities to practice his craft in the Orient, learning some of its languages. But when he killed, it wasn't called a crime. It was called heroism. And he wasn't just any soldier. The men we're looking for had duties that required disguises. A soldier. Ryan sounded breathless. I do indeed feel like I'm dangling by my feet from the bottom of the earth. De Quincey's pretty cool, huh? So, we've been here, you've been very patient. Would you like to ask some questions? You might.